All right, Shadow, this is your chance to talk now. Tell the world how you feel about hockey. All right, there. Your chance to tell the world what you think about hockey. I know you're full of Chinese food I gave you, but you can tell the world now how you feel about hockey. That's the life I've led for years and years and years until these videos. I have been sort of an island in my own home, raising children and being with a miserable woman who didn't really want to be with me. Which is not pertinent information to hockey-related matters, just it's the truth. People wonder why I'm still single 2 years later. On hockey matters, today the Blackhawks reminded me why they're the smartest team in hockey. Now, Carolina did well. Teravainen could become a good player. As well, Bickle, with a change of scenery, maybe he gets back into 10-goal range. Maybe he plays a full NHL season next year. It's the cap hit. It's the $4.5 million salary. Chicago is doing what they do. You sign guys for a lot of money, and then you figure out who you're keeping and who you're getting rid of. And it's true that Chicago is paying a price now for potentially overvaluing some of its players. But when you win as many Stanley Cups as they've won, you're going to overvalue some players. So I don't hold that against them. And people keep talking about whether or not the Leafs are going to trade the number one pick, and I just can't see it. They threw away an entire season so they could draft Austin Matthews. They won the draft lottery so they can draft Austin Matthews. I can't see it. The earliest draft pick I can see being in play is Columbus at 3 with Puljujarvi. And that's only because Columbus isn't that far off from being a playoff team. They have a lot of really good, strong pieces, and they have a good young team. But they're probably lacking a little bit in every area, and except goaltending, Bobrovsky's been fantastic, and McElhinney's been fine as a backup. But, does Puljujarvi, does trading him make sense? I honestly don't think it does. I think this year's top 3 draft picks are potentially solid enough that you don't want to trade them. And it reminds me of last year going up to the trade, or up to the draft. And there was even rumors at one point maybe Buffalo would think about moving the number 2 pick, which became Michael. No. And then Carolina locked out, and Noah Hannafin dropped into their laps. So Carolina with Noah Hannafin, they've got their future stud power play quarterback, all-around fantastic player, who I think, while Connor McDavid gets all the attention and Jack Eichel gets whatever's left over, I think Noah Hannafin is a steal at where he was picked. Because Noah Hannafin, I think, has franchise defenseman written on him. And he's the first defenseman I've seen who's got that. Other than Ekblad, maybe it's something down in the south, but these two of all the young defensemen in the NHL, Ekblad and Hannafin, seem to have all the tools to very quickly become legitimate all-stars in their own right. But I mean, there's a lot of rumors swirling right now, and I don't want to get into them because this is the wacky time of year. I mean, it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable as a sports fan, but it gets wacky. And there are a lot of Leafs fans who say, when we get Stamkos is coming here. I've been on TSN's website and I've been on Sportsnet's website today, going through comment sections and just shaking my head like, the assumption is Stamkos is coming, and it's based on, there's a tweet that he made that he later said everybody made a big deal about that they shouldn't have. I honestly think Stammer wants to stay in Tampa. I don't think Stammer wants to go anywhere. The problem is while Tampa can give him a year longer in a deal than anybody else because they'd be re-signing him. Thanks to guys like Kucherov, Johnson, Killorn, Palat, Hedman, Bishop, all of these players who are going to command or are commanding big money, Stammer is probably just priced right out of the market. Another thing, too, that came through today is Vegas is pretty much a certainty for 2017. It looks like if they go by the name of the company that's bringing the team to Vegas, I think it's the Black Knight Corporation or something like that. So they'd be the Las Vegas Black Knights. I'm fine with Knights. Just leave it at Knights. You can make a nice logo where you have your standard Knights sort of logo. Not full armor, obviously, just the helmet and maybe swords on the sleeves, whatever. Obviously black and then silver, and leave it simple. And it's a sad time for Quebec because if they don't get into this expansion, it doesn't look like they're going to. Quebec's likely done. I can't see the Quebec city area getting a team ever. The Canadian dollar hasn't helped. Personally, I think having Brian Mulroney being part of the team that's trying to bring a team to Quebec, I think is a problem as well. I know he's a former prime minister, but man, I couldn't stand Mulroney. I'm terrified his kid's going to get into politics at some point and stop being on Entertainment Tonight. But no, it's been an interesting week for hockey, and of course, there's Gordie Howe's passing, and everything has been overshadowed by what happened in Orlando on Saturday night, and then the way it gets politicized, and I'm always shocked at how quickly tragedy is politicized these days. Maybe that's why I love sports so much. Gordie Howe passes away. There's no politics to it. It is too bad. He was 88 years old. He lived a long life. He lived a good life. I never saw any reports with him where he seemed unhappy about his life or anything he did in his life. He had dignity in class, carried himself well. I never heard anything bad about him. I heard plenty of bad about Bobby Hull. I'm not getting into it. But I know when I was a kid and Brett Hull was coming up, and my dad said to me, he said, well, I hope he's a nicer guy than Bobby. And he told me that when he was in the military, Bobby Hull came into, I don't know if it was a pub they were all at or if it was an actual military mess hall. He said nobody talked to him. They all knew it was Bobby Hull. 50-goal scorer, fantastic, huge star in the NHL. Nobody talked to him. And it was because of some things. I'm not getting into that because I'm not, it's not important. You do a Google search, you'll find it right away, pretty much. But I always thought that was odd. And somehow uniquely Canadian. That we, in the U.S., it seems like no matter, and I was just watching an O.J. Simpson thing about him as well. With celebrities, no matter what they do, no matter how guilty they look, Americans will still idol worship their idols. In Canada, we love our sports figures and our celebrities, but don't be an asshole. If we think you're an asshole, we're not going to care if you get traded. we're we're going to be a lot less friendly to you in public. We're not going to ask you for an autograph. We're going to turn and go, hey, look, that's John Smith of the Vancouver Canucks. He's a prick. Fuck him. And you turn your head the other way and you keep talking to your friends because you don't care that this guy's a celebrity. You don't care that he's a star, even a local celebrity. If you know or you think you know through rumors that the guy's a prick, he's a prick. And you'll turn your head the other way. And to me, that just seems very Canadian. That we value character as much as we value talent and leadership. Character is huge. Which is why, as a Canucks fan, I was very glad to see Kessler move on. And I was glad when they started moving out some of these guys. I think character in sports is underrated as being important. Um, it is important. It's important because there are little kids that look up to your sports stars, whether it's hockey, football, basketball, baseball. And when a guy's making 10, 15, 20 million a year, depending on the sport, and he's a complete ass, there's still kids out there seeing that and going, man, look at him. He just doesn't give a shit. That's great. That's the way I'm going to be. And while people can cut the Sedins down, and people do, for every time I hear Sedin sisters, I go, it's because they're Swedes. It's not because they play a soft game. They don't. I've watched them play hockey for 16 years. They are not soft players. You don't need just to have 70, 80, 90, 150 penalty minutes a year to prove you're a tough guy. They don't have to prove they're tough guys anyways, since they're star forwards. The Sedins have been picked on and smacked around as much as I've seen Crosby get smacked around in the playoffs this year. Kind of comes with being a star player. The NHL does not, and I gotta watch how I say this because it's gonna ignite comments. There are certain teams that get better calls from the ref than others. I can understand why some people think that certain teams and certain players are protected by the NHL. But compared to the other leagues, the NHL does a lousy job protecting its star players. You can't hit a quarterback in football. You can't even sneeze in a quarterback's direction at this point without getting a penalty. Star players in basketball get certain calls. I know it happens in hockey. But it seems like other sports understand better than the NHL that to sell your game, you have to sell your stars. The NHL did that with Gretzky because Gretzky promoted himself. You have a guy who's scoring over 200 points a season. You don't have to promote him. Everybody's going to go out and watch this guy because he's scoring an average of 3 points a game. Unheard of. And Lemieux got a lot of attention as well through scoring pretty damn near as much as Gretzky. And if not for injuries, I think Lemieux would probably be at the 2,600 point mark for his career. I think he would have got within shouting distance to Gretzky, and who knows, with enough games, and if he'd been healthy, maybe he passes Gretzky. But you look at the players now, and the way that they market the game, it's just, it's hard to wrap my brain around it. Because I look at basketball, and I know all the stars on teams that I don't even watch because of the way basketball markets the players. You're not watching Cleveland, you're watching LeBron. You're not watching Golden State, you're watching Steph Curry. They take their stars and they market their stars. The only time the NHL seems to do that really is when you have Crosby and Ovechkin on opposite sides of the ice. And again, because they're the two most dynamic players of their generation that came into the league at pretty damn near the same time. The interest is there anyways. The NHL doesn't have to create interest. Our interest is peaked immediately just knowing they're going to go at it in a playoff series. But now if you have, say, Florida playing Nashville, the NHL is just going to go, well, tonight the Panthers and the Predators are playing. And you won't hear Shea Weber versus Aaron Ekblad, which is what it should be. And it's kind of a shame. I think that's part of the reason why the NHL is behind all of the other sports in terms of revenue, and there was a point at which basketball was number 4 in the U.S. I'm old enough to remember that. Okay, I remember when it was baseball, then football, and then hockey was in third. Although the soccer back in the late 70s, early 80s, I seem to remember the New York Cosmos being a big deal as well. basketball wasn't really thought of until basketball learned to really market its stars. And if the NHL is ever going to blaze their way ahead and make the kind of silly money that the other three sports, being basketball, baseball, and football, make, you got to market your stars. You got to. Anyways, it should be magic to watch the draft next Friday. They have an interesting article today on Sportsnet about the teams that have 2 first-rounders and to watch and see if they trade their second first-rounders. I think they'll try. I think there's going to be teams that try to do what Boston did last year. There's no way Boston planned to draft at 12, 13, 14. That was Sweeney just covering his ass after. He planned to move up. He figured he could take 12, 13, 14, package them, and probably move up into the top 6. He probably made an offer to somebody, and that GM went, no. There's nothing at 12, 13, 14 that interests me. And at that point, you're done. And now this year, Boston has 2 first-rounders again. So it should be an interesting draft for me on that standpoint because I love my Bruins. And they'll be drafting. Well, no, they're drafting 9 places after the Canucks. And Dallas isn't only in the first round because when they traded Chris Russell, they traded a conditional first-rounder if they made the conference finals. And because they couldn't find a goalie to stop a beach ball against St. Louis, it's a second-rounder they gave up for Chris Russell, which is good because Chris Russell is not worth a first-round draft pick. He just isn't. Calgary made out like bandits in that trade because now he's a UFA and Calgary can sign him back. I had to laugh when I was reading on TSN that Brian Burke covets size in this year's draft. Leafs fans should be laughing at that. As a former Canucks GM, I remember him here. He coveted size, and it was a mixed bag, to say the least. I'm surprised Brad May hasn't come out of retirement to play for Calgary, but I digress. Burke is... When I hear people say they're drafting for size or they're looking at size, all I think is, did you watch Pittsburgh? Did you watch how they won the Cup? It's not just Pittsburgh. It's the teams that were in the Final Four. All of them were fast teams. In the end, San Jose, I think part of the reason they lost is because I think Thornton and Marleau ran out of gas. It is the only explanation I have for 2 shots in the third period of a game where you're eliminated if you lose. Because there's 2 explanations. Either your players are tired and exhausted, or they have no heart. And I don't believe in this day and age it's possible to have a team in the final that doesn't have a heart. So I don't believe that about San Jose. I think they were just tired. I think that run to the final just took everything out of them. I think Pittsburgh wore them down and overwhelmed them with their speed. St. Louis did not have that kind of speed. The Kings, whether they did or didn't have it, they didn't have the goaltending. And Pittsburgh had goaltending. We can debate how good Matt Murray was. The fact is he won 15 games as a rookie. He was in the conversation before the final for the Conn Smythe. He fell out of that conversation during the final, but he wasn't that far off. And that's amazing for a teenager. So he has to be their starting goalie, if not next year, then the year after. But if Fleury moves, then he's their starter. I wouldn't be surprised to see Zakhoff come back as the backup. Zakhoff played decently. He's a decent goaltender. He's a good backup. And that's a good, affordable tandem. As a Dallas fan, I'd be salivating over that tandem. But I guess we'll see. We are now a week and a day, so 8 days away from the draft. There'll be a lot of trades between now and then. And every time there's a trade, I will do a video with my point of view. Carolina wins right now for players. Chicago wins by getting cap flexibility. So you can't look at this just as 2 players for 2 draft picks, because the 2 draft picks likely don't make the NHL. That cap space will get used to either re-sign other players or bring somebody else in. So if you have to sacrifice Teravainen to keep a guy like Ladd, it's a win. I don't know if it's Ladd, though. I really don't know if Chicago's going to keep Ladd, because he didn't really help them much in the playoffs. I had expected so much more. I had expected Chicago to be so deadly in the playoffs, and they just weren't. So, anyways, that's it from me for tonight. May all of the hockey players that you meet in your public life be decent, good guys. And on that note, at a local card shop slash collector's store, jersey store, whatever you want to call it, sports goods store. When a couple years ago Zach Cashian came down for an autograph signing, I went, and I didn't go, and it's a block from me. And it was funny because after the autograph signing, a few weeks later, I went in there and they had Zach Cashian shirts on for cheap. Nobody was buying them. And I said something to somebody, and the answer I got back was, of the people we've had here, he was probably the least friendly. I don't know what his problem was, but he wasn't very friendly with anybody. And they acknowledged right away, like, he may have been having an off day. But that's the character thing. He made a poor impression on fans locally, apparently. And that matters. Matters to Canadian fans. So, be nice. And may all the players you meet be nice. Alrighty. Thanks for watching.